Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist and today I'm going to be doing a top 10 video. So I'm really excited to do this for you guys because it's actually going to be my top 10 favorite decks of all time. And I'm really excited to do this for you guys because you guys actually voted for this one in the community tab, which is really exciting that we had so many people come over and actually vote to see this particular video. That is really awesome. And I really quickly wanted to say thank you to everybody who went over and voted for this video. I was really excited to actually do this for you guys because I keep seeing over and over the question of DarkArmedDuelist, what's your favorite deck of all time? What deck do you carry with you all the time whenever you go to locals or go to an event just to play around with fun? Or what's your favorite deck that has the most awesome artwork in the entire game of Yu-Gi-Oh? So without further ado guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below for all those awesome awards like getting your name description in every single video, getting a signed card to the mail, and even getting to request a deck profile every single month you're a patron along with test ins. And let's get straight into the list guys. Number 10 guys is gonna be Relinquished, and the reason I love Relinquished so much is it was actually the very first card that I ever owned in Yu-Gi-Oh! And the reason I love this deck so much is because you can actually mix it with kaijus, which makes this deck really, really crazy. Mixing it with kaijus is really fun because you can actually out any monster in the entire game of Yu-Gi-Oh! By just giving your opponent a kaiju, ritual summoning out your copy of your Relinquished, and then gobbling the monster up with your Relinquished and increasing the attack from 0 to whatever the attack points that the kaiju had, essentially making a really big Relinquished monster and being able to attack your opponent for game, which is a really awesome thing to be able to do. This deck is a really fun deck to play around with. I love the artwork of Relinquished. It's such a creepy, cool looking card, and being able to include cards like Millenniumize, Restrict, its fusion monster is an insanely powerful card. I really love the way this deck plays, and it is such a special place in my heart with it being the very first card that I ever owned in Yu-Gi-Oh! Number 9 is going to be Heroes. Heroes is a very broad statement in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Because there's actually about 7 different types of heroes in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Which is just really, really crazy. It's one of the most supported types in the entire game of Yu-Gi-Oh! As well, which is really, really awesome. Now, my particular favorite version of Heroes is actually going to be the Omni-Hero build, where you can include any hero monster that you want into the deck, taking the best elements of every single archetype and putting it into this deck to make it an absolutely crazy monster of a deck. My favorite card in this deck is actually going to be Evil Hero Malicious Bane, which is an insanely awesome card, being able to board wipe your opponent, and it has so much protection built in, and it's a really awesome card. I love the way this deck plays, being able to fusion summon into all sorts of really amazing cards, and using link monsters to extend your plays. It is just one of my favorite decks of all time, and a deck that I often carry with me whenever I'm going to a locals or trying to go and compete because it's a really fun deck to play around with. Number 8 is Shaddolls. Shaddolls is a really insane deck that you can actually fuse into any other deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! Which is a really insane thing to be able to do. I've done before in the past a week's worth of Shaddoll deck profiles for you guys and still had decks sitting around that I couldn't even show because I had to narrow it down to just 7 for that week. It's an absolutely insane engine to be able to fuse into any single deck, and it's a fusion-based archetype that is just absolutely insane. I love the way the deck plays, being able to fusion summon from the deck with cards like Shaddoll Fusion, and then also summoning out extremely powerful monsters like El Shaddoll Construct. I remember when this card went to 0, and I actually waited for years for this card to come off and go back to 3, and ever since it's been back at 3, I've been playing with Shaddolls non-stop. I love the way this deck plays. It is a super fun deck to play around with, and it's just insane how many different types you can throw this deck into. It's really, really fun, and it focuses around having different elements from wind, water, fire, earth, light, and dark. There is a Shaddoll fusion for every single one in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And even being able to utilize cards like Super Polymerization in this deck to use your opponent's monsters to make your insanely powerful Shaddoll monsters. Number 7 is Zombie World. I love this deck with the way that you can actually build this. You can build it a lot of different ways that you can include the most powerful cards in the entire zombie type. And the really awesome thing about Zombie World as a whole is it's not quite an archetype, it's more of a type of monster, which makes it so you can use all different kind of zombies from all different decks, but the main boss monster that I like to summon in this deck is Doom King Ballardrot, which is an insanely powerful monster that can negate and banish cards on the field. And the power of the Zombie World field spell is just a really amazing card to be able to turn every single monster on the field into a zombie, and every single card in both players' graveyards into zombies is an extremely powerful effect. If you're playing against any tribute summon deck as well, it helps out a lot too, because if your opponent's not playing zombies, then they can't tribute summon anything but zombies. I love the card Unizombie as well in this deck because it helps out a lot to be able to dump any of your zombies to the graveyard, and it's an extremely powerful archetype that basically lets you use your graveyard to get powerful monsters back onto the field. This deck can go into fusion plays, synchro plays, XZs, links, anything that you can imagine. Zombie World can do it, and that's why I love this deck so much. Number 6 is Magical Musketeers. I love this deck because it has one of the weirdest gameplay styles in the entire game of Yu-Gi-Oh, being column based. So the way this deck actually functions is if you have a Magical Musketeer in column 3, right in the middle of the board where the 2 extra monster zones are here, and that monster is in the middle, if you activate a spell or trap directly below that copy of your Magical Musketeer, they get effects, which is really, really cool. Being able to use cards like Magical Musketeer Starfire, Caspar, and Doc being the main ones that you're going to be using in this deck to get all sorts of different effects, being able to search, special summon additional Magical Musketeers to your side of the field, or search Magical Musket cards from the graveyard is really, really helpful for this deck. And it's a really interesting thing because it not only works when you activate spell and traps, but when your opponent activates spells and traps in the same column, which is really, really awesome. If your opponent doesn't know what they're doing against Magical Musketeers, you can gain some serious card advantage because you can gain cards when they activate Magical Musketeer, or when they activate cards in the same column as your Magical Musketeer cards. The cool thing about this deck as well is it's basically hand traps the deck, which is hilarious because any one of your Magical Musketeers is on the field, you can actually activate your Magical Musket spell and traps from your hand, which is a very interesting concept for this deck to have. Basically having cards like Cross Domination that can negate monster effects and drop a monster down to 0 attack, popping a card on the field with your copy of Desperado, and negating spells and traps with your copy of Last Stand. This deck completely controls the board and is a really, really fun deck to play with. Number 5 is going to be Armed Dragon Thunder. I absolutely love this deck, and it's a really fun deck that lets you level up your Armed Dragons to get all the way up into an insanely powerful boss monster, going from Armed Dragon level 3 to Armed Dragon level 5, 7, and then finally Armed Dragon Thunder level 10, which is an insanely powerful monster, gaining all sorts of different abilities as it gets stronger and stronger, starting with 1, 10, 100, 1000, 10,000 Majome Thunder, which is a really, really awesome thing to be able to do. I love the way this deck plays, and it's retrains of the old school Armed Dragon monsters, which was one of my favorite cards when I first started playing Yu-Gi-Oh! It is a really, really awesome archetype, being able to level up those monsters into that really insanely powerful monster, and ending with fields where you have the Armed Dragon Thunder level 10, the Armed Dragon White level 10, and even being able to summon out the original Armed Dragon level 10 is just a really, really cool thing. I love the artwork of this deck. It's a really fun deck to play around with, and it even had a pack based around it, which is what's really amazing about this whole archetype. Number 4 is going to be Red Eyes Black Dragon. I love this deck. It plays one of the most nostalgic monsters in the entire game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And it's just a really fun deck. There's a lot of ways to actually build this deck, but the build that I have finally settled on, that I found my favorite, to be the XZ build, being able to summon out Red Eyes Flare Metal Dragon, which is one of my favorite cards in the entire game of Yu-Gi-Oh! I love this card because basically when it's on your side of the field, every time your opponent activates an effect, they lose 500 life points. And the more flare metals you have on the field, the less effects that they can activate before they ultimately burn themselves out. If you have just one flare metal on the field, they get 16 effects if their life points are at 8,000. If you have 2, they have 8. And if you have 3, it goes down even more, which is a really insane thing. If your opponent breathes, that's 500. They change their hand from one hand to the other, that's 5 more hundred. They look at you funny, that's 500 more life points right there. Anything they do pretty much in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh, they're going to take 500 life points. I love that card so much. It's super fun to be able to play around with, and I really love the artwork of it too. Being a retrain of the old school Red Eyes Black Metal Dragon, and then changing it into Flare Metal Dragon, into this insanely powerful card, and being one of the most nostalgic cards in the entire game, played by one of my favorite characters in the entire series, Joey Wheeler, is just a really insane thing to be able to do. I love the way this deck plays, and hopefully it gets more support going forward in the future. Number 3 is going to be Dark Lord. So Dark Lords are some of my favorite cards in the entire game, because you have cards like the first Dark Lord, Morningstar, and even Dark Lord Shell that have some of the best artwork in the entire game of Yu-Gi-Oh! I love the artwork of every single Dark Lord in the entire game, and you have cards in the deck that are really amazing that are spells and traps, like Dark Lord Rebellion, Banishment of the Dark Lords, and even Dark Lord Contact, that you can basically use twice per turn, because some of your Dark Lord monsters in the deck actually have the ability to pay 1,000 life points, shuffle your Dark Lord spell or trap back into the deck, and then copy the ability that it had in the graveyard, which is a really amazing effect. From getting to reborn some of your Dark Lords with Contact, being able to search your deck for different Dark Lord cards with Banishment, and even being able to pop cards on the field with copies of Dark Lord Rebellion, you have some really amazing generic effects that you can use with this deck. It makes some really amazingly powerful fairy monsters in the form of your first Dark Lord, which the first Dark Lord goes all the way up to 4,000 attack points and 4,000 defense points, which is an insanely big monster for this deck to have. I love this deck because I've been playing it ever since Destiny Soldiers released, and it has some of the best artwork in the entire game of Yu-Gi-Oh! So for number 2, guys, is actually going to be the deck that you guys probably thought was going to be the number 1 deck on this list, but it's actually sitting in the number 2 slot, and it's going to be Dark Armed Dragon Turbo. So I absolutely love this deck. It's a really fun deck to be able to play around with. It can summon out all 3 copies of Dark Armed Dragon in a single turn, which is a really amazing feat to be able to do. I love this deck because basically what it does is you draw all sorts of different draw power cards to dig through the deck to finally grab out your copies of your Dark Armed Dragon, which is really, really amazing. Summoning out all 3 copies onto your side of the field is really amazing because it also has a really awesome effect to be able to banish cards from the graveyard that are dark to then pop cards on your opponent's side of the field. Now you might be thinking, with all that draw power, aren't you going to be discarding a lot? Well, you do, but the way I built this deck, you actually have a really amazing thing that you can do to control the darks in the graveyard, which helps out the deck a lot. To be able to control the exact amount that you have to go into all 3 copies and ultimately OTK your opponent. This deck is a deck that is totally weird that I came up with just on a whim, and it's just a really fun deck. I figure with me being DarkArmedDuelist, I had to have some sort of deck that could summon out all 3 in a single turn. With Dark Armed Dragon being in the number 2 slot, guys, what could possibly be in the number 1? Well, it's my favorite deck of all time, Blackwings. I absolutely love Blackwings. It's my favorite deck. Whenever I go to locals, if I don't have it with me, I feel like I didn't bring my cards with me. It is just an absolutely amazing deck to play around with because it has so much support. Being able to summon out pretty much a Towers monster, Blackwing Full Armraster, that basically cannot be destroyed by any card effect. It's unaffected by every card effect, and having so many unique card effects on this card is just really amazing. It's a deck that I've played for almost 10 years, and it's a deck that I really, really love. It's the one that I always come back to play into tournaments with at locals because it just takes people by surprise, and it's a really amazing deck. At one point, this deck even won Worlds, which is just really amazing. It was a long time ago, but it still did win Worlds, and this is a deck that I've won an ARG with, I've won multiple locals with, and it's just a really amazing deck. I love the way the deck plays. It's very fast. It's a swarm-based build that you basically use your Black Whirlwind, and every time you normal summon a monster to your side of the field with Black Whirlwind on your side of the field, you're going to basically climb the ladder down with your Blackwings to search other Blackwings from the deck that have lower attack points than the one you just searched, which is a really amazing thing, which is why Blackwings is my favorite deck of all time. I love the Blackwing deck, and it's really, really fun to play around with. So that's it for my top 10 favorite decks of all time, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell next so you can become part of Notification Squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below for all those awesome rewards. And comment down below what your favorite deck is of all time and why it is your favorite deck. I love Blackwings because I played it for so long. I love all these other decks on this list because I've been playing them for a very long time. Blackwings are personally my favorite because I've just played them forever, and it's a deck that I always find myself coming back to and just playing over and over and over again. So anyways, guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can become part of Notification Squad, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.